government to say something or to do something. And of course, having done so, there's some reaction to it in the national community. I saw, for example, on today's papers, I think the headline says, "No comfort, little comfort." So the minister is between a rock and a hard place, wanting to say something to bring comfort to the citizenry, but having so done, there are those who feel that it makes no difference. This situation that we are facing in Trinidad and Tobago is a very seriously challenging one indeed. And everyone naturally, in the fear and the pain and the trauma, would look to the government, and more so the minister and the Ministry of National Security, for some kind of protection and relief, and that is quite proper, quite normal, and to be expected. But as Minister Young and many of us would have explained as government ministers over time, the job of the minister, the government, is to provide policy directions for, to provide resources to, and as legislators, to provide the necessary legislative platform so that law enforcement can proceed lawfully and constitutionally to carry out its work. In other words, a very important aspect of what we can do and must do as parliamentarians is to go to the parliament as a government with measures sometimes called for by the security forces, sometimes called for by the public, sometimes from observable social circumstances, but whatever the reasons, we go to Parliament with proposals for its passage there to make this the law so that we can, on that legislative platform, authorize and qualify law enforcement to do the work that it must do, because the minister could make pronouncement as he wishes. The Prime Minister could talk from here till doomsday. We as citizens could talk and talk as we like. The reality is, it is the law enforcement agencies that has a job of work to do once they get the policy directions from the government, once they get the resources that they require, and once they get the legislative platform on which they can lawfully operate. Those are the facts. But we are not the only ones in the parliament. We have 23 members on the government benches, and we have 18 members on the opposition benches, at least in the House of Representatives. In the Senate, of the 41 of them, there are 16 government members, there are 9 independents and 6 opposition senators. I think by now it is well known to the national community that not everything the government wants in terms of legislative proposals it can get, especially when it requires special majority votes, not a simple majority, where the government's majority, by virtue of being in government, will be brought to bear to pass the legislation quite easily. I think it is well known. But I read today's papers following all of the talk of the opposition, calling on the government to do something, and the blood of the country is at the hands of the government, and it is for the government to do something. That is members of parliament speaking, those in the parliamentary opposition. Fair enough. But listen to what Dr. Suraj Rambachan is reported to be saying, the Tabakit member of parliament, in today's Express. Tabakit MP Surajratan Rambachan has said the citizenry is in a state of siege, like sitting ducks awaiting the predator. And this is the quotation: "The UNC cannot and will not support legislation or condone acts of the government which infringe upon the constitutional rights of citizens." Sounds good. But I know what it means. He goes on, the opposition will not support laws which require a constitutional majority, but which the government chooses to pass with a simple majority. So this is not the first time that the opposition is saying plainly that it will not give us the support. When I say give us, I mean give us the country, because all 41 of us in the House of Representatives are parliamentarians with equal responsibility to the people of Trinidad and Tobago. Dr. Munilal made it clear in debates in the past that they will not support legislation that requires a special majority. And in crises such as the one we face in Trinidad and Tobago, it requires sometimes draconian laws like the anti-gang law. It requires the law to go beyond the norm and the ordinary in order to catch the outlaws and to put them where they're supposed to be, away from civilized people and incarcerated in safer and healthier and happier places for us. So very often, in order to achieve that, the measures that you bring will require a special majority, because sometimes they tend to infringe on the constitutional rights as established in the Constitution. But of course, the very Constitution says that you can pass laws that infringe the Constitution, but it must be passed with a special majority. So the Constitution makes provision for that. So when we bring these measures in these very pressing and trying and crime-ridden times, looking for the support, the UNC's position, the opposition's position, is that they will not give us that support. Us, the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago. And of course, reference to where they pass it with a simple majority is all about the fact that on occasions when we went to the Parliament and they signaled from their words and in their conduct that they will not be supporting the measures to protect the people of Trinidad and Tobago, we would have taken out some of the provisions that would have required the special majority so that we could pass the legislation, even in its weaker state sometimes, without the special majority. But the opposition's position is that we will not get that support. So I am here today to say to the national community, we find that we are not getting the cooperation and support of the parliamentarians, some of whom are lawyers, not the least the member for Siparia, who in many debates shout across the floor to tell us, not only will we not support your legislation to protect the people who they deceitfully pretended to be arguing for and calling on the government to solve the crime problems, but we will take you to court if we had to. And that they did. One of the things we had to do in order to begin to resolve this problem is to appoint a commissioner of police. We had before that Mr. Stephen Williams acting as commissioner in 6-month stints, and that went on for 6 years. Kamla Prasad Bisesa and the UNC as the government between 2010 and 2015 did absolutely nothing to make Mr. Williams a firm and appointed commissioner of police. They continue to have him act in 6-month stints. It is when we went to government in 2015, we immediately took up the legislation and began the process to appoint a commissioner of police. And as we did that, Kamla Prasad Bisesa of Senior Counsel took the matter to court, claiming that the law, the order, was flawed because the minister ought not to trigger the process. They went to court, the court tweaked it, and so it was the minister's rule came out. We went ahead with the process, the Police Service Commission did its thing, and we came up with a merit list, and we went through that. Their first position was to support a man called Mr. Dolal Chan, a Deputy Commissioner of Police. They did not lend support for Mr. Williams. They did not lend support for anyone else. And we, of course, did not support Mr. Dulal Chand. We were accused of being racial and all manners of nonsense. Eventually, it came down to Mr. Gary Griffith, and the government supported the appointment of a commissioner of police who we now have in office, Mr. Gary Griffith, who I'll take the opportunity to congratulate for his perspicacity and his very hard work in trying to deal with the issues that confront every one of us, wherever we live. Only last week, a citizen of this country somewhere in the St. Clements area found himself in his home, retreated to his bedroom 2 or 3 in the morning, criminals banging down the door. Fortunately for him, he was the holder of a licensed firearm, and he waited patiently, and as the intruders got through the bedroom window, he shot to protect himself and his family, and 1 man died. A 19-year-old from nowhere close to St. Clement, but somewhere along the East-West corridor. This is serious trauma. Last week in my constituency, we lost about 6 lives. I went to the home day before yesterday of a woman who lost her husband, who was a non-combatant, innocent, neither Muslim nor Rasta gang. Hard-working man, left home 5 o'clock in the morning to pull bull, to work, to buy books for his children, as she cryingly told me. Today he's no more. So the situation is real. But we can't behave like criminals and outlaws. We have to pass laws. We have to use the courts. We have to use the institution of the states to do it. And there's one institution called the Parliament where the UNC sits. So they oppose everything that they could. They opposed the appointment of the Commissioner Griffith. At the end, when it came down to Griffith, they did not even support him. They voted for Stephen Williams, the same officer who for 5 years they took absolutely no action to put the procedure in place so that he would have had the chance to become a full-fledged commissioner. But that is not all. That is not all. We went to the Parliament with a bail bill. In the Senate, we began it there, the Attorney General. And this bill is to suggest in tightening up the laws in order to deal with the trauma that the UNC deceitfully complain about. And while they complain on the one hand, they take every possible action to ensure that these fellas get a get-out-of-jail card because they believe wrongly and foolishly and wickedly that if crime proliferates and if they take action to make sure that this country is unable to respond adequately to the crime situation, they will get some kind of political advantage while we all die at the hands of these mindless criminals, and they will ride back into office to perpetrate the crimes they perpetrated white collar against us again. That's what they believe wrongly and foolishly. So we went to Parliament in the Senate with this bail bill, where we say if you had a conviction and now you are charged for a fresh offense, bail will be denied of you. Because the Constitution makes provision for bail, but we want to infringe the Constitution to make sure it's tightened up so you would remain in the place where uncivilized people are supposed to remain and leave the civilized law-abiding remainder of us out here to go about our law-abiding businesses. We went there with another proposal. If you had a charge, meeting another charge, your bail would be restricted. No surprise. On the backs and on the basis of Mr. Rambachand's UNC opposition position that there will be no support, the UNC, 6 of them in the Senate, failed to support those measures to protect you, the citizens of the Republic. Every single independent supported it. These professionals, without the burden of being a party hack, bringing their intellect to bear, every one of them supported it. And we were able to pass that bill against the wishes of the UNC in the Senate. And it is now due for debate in the lower house. That is not all. We brought amendments to the evidence bill because people are saying they are afraid to give evidence in court. There are people in this country who see a murder and can be of great value to the police, but they are afraid. So we brought amendments to the evidence bill which says essentially three things. One, witnesses will be able to give evidence in anonymity. Their voice would be heard. Counsel would see them. The judge would see them so that you could see their disposition, their mannerisms, to make your own assessments as to the veracity of what they say. But the criminal who in the dock will not be able to see the witness's face. So the witness don't have the fear because sometimes they look at them and they torment them, threatening eyes, threatening demeanor. Other members of the public, the family and friends who sit down in the court watching the witnesses in an intimidating manner, thwarting and perverting the course of justice in a civilized society. So we made a provision for anonymous witness evidence. Another provision to use CCTV camera footage. So once the camera picks it up, in China, they say 98% of China is cameraed. In London, when you leave home at 6 in the morning and you go back at 6 in the evening from work, the experts tell you you would have been photographed on an average about 54 times. CCTV camera footage is critical in dealing with crime today. We went to the parliament to say once the camera picks it up, it is now presented to the jury and even to the accused. Case closed. Once the image is clear enough and so on, case closed, there are rules. And then we were codifying the judge's rules, where when the police arrest persons under the old common law positions, you had to tell them of their rights. You are not obliged to say anything unless you wish to do so, and whatever you say, and feeding the prisoner on time. All of these things are common law rules, and we wanted to codify them. That is to say, write them into hard law, so the police would be bound by them as rights. They are rights now, but we wanted to write it into the law. You know what? The UNC opposed that again, the parliamentary opposition. They opposed that. And all of the independents applying their minds, their intellect, their wisdom, and having a feel for what is happening in our society, every one of them voted for it. But not the UNC. They resolutely opposed it. And that's not all. You know the history of the anti-gang law. We supported it when it came in 2012. They passed it. They misused it. Today we're still paying people who was wrongly arrested under it without building the right set of evidence and cases to convince the court. That's how they used it, the anti-gang law. There was a sunset clause for 5 years which expired in 2016, by which time we were in government. And we went back to the parliament because we realized the problem was still existing. It probably even got worse. Because after the police and they went and arrested 245 people under the anti-gang law, and then the cases started to flounder in the court, and the DPP started to say, don't continue the prosecutions. The police lost confidence in their work, they lost confidence in the law, and they virtually stopped until the matter was resolved in all the courts. So the anti-gang law, for those reasons, failed. By which time Mr. Justice Nolan Barrow in the court had given directions as to what the police should do when they charge somebody under this law, and now the police had a better blueprint for going forward in practice. So they were ready to roll again. By then the government changed. 2016, we are in office. We went into the parliament with all of those facts, asking for the UNC's support in the same way that we gave them support when the law was passed. And you know what? In typical UNC opposition style, they opposed it. They refused to support it. So it was good for them to fight crime when they were in office, but it wasn't good to protect you once the PNM was in office. Unprincipled wickedness, recklessness, I would say. And along with the anti-gang law that we supported, there was a bail bill too, where if you were charged under the anti-gang law, bail would have been restricted for 120 days. The criminals afraid that bad. They rather get locked up for, well, they get locked up for a gun, they get locked up for robbery, anything on its own, but don't charge them under the anti-gang law because that meant no bail. So we saw the effectiveness of that. The police told us so. Notwithstanding all of that, the UNC opposed it, and it was only when the public, supported by your writing in the newspaper, created an uproar for the opposition. They then called on us to amend the standing orders of the parliament to allow them to bring back the anti-gang law, to allow us to bring back the anti-gang law into the same session of parliament. That could not have happened if you didn't amend the standing orders. We did that, and very reluctantly, with public pressure, they came in and they supported the anti-gang law, but not the bail law to accompany it. So I've told you all of that, ladies and gentlemen, and that's not all, you know. You remember FATCA, because we're dealing with crime and money and taxes and sharing information with international partners so we could get a hold of this international crime. They did not support that. And it was only again with public pressure that they caved in and they supported FATCA. You remember that, the non-profit organizations bill in this world of terrorism and terrorist activity. And we had evidence that people were using companies in order to do certain things. So we wanted to strengthen the law and the non-profit organization law. They didn't support that. Initially, it was only reluctantly they did it. Whistleblower legislation to encourage fellow citizens to give information to deal with corruption. They refused to support that, so we weren't able to pass that. And the civil asset recovery law and management and unexplained wealth, you remember that? We spent long hours in the parliament, and they would not support it. We had to rearrange that to be able to pass it with a simple majority, but we did. And since then, we have proclaimed the unexplained wealth law. So as it now stands, you are in a better position, Trinidad and Tobago, when you call on people who is suspected or being investigated for criminal conduct. Come and explain your wealth. We've been through that. So I've called us here today to really cause you, members of the media, to share with the national community the hypocrisy of those who have a responsibility to support laws that are for the protection of the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago. We were in opposition too. We've been in government, we've been in opposition, but we try to be responsible. And I just told you about the anti-gang law. We saw the wisdom in it. When we were in opposition between 1995 and 2001, I was a parliamentarian. 18 occasions the UNC led by Mr. Pandey came, on 18 occasions requiring special majorities, and we supported it. When we came to office, we made history in this country. We voted for their budget because we sensed that it was good for the country. We sensed that it was really largely ours. They just had a short time. We did that. We tried to act responsibly. So I conclude by saying, before I take your questions, ladies and gentlemen of the media, those who call on us to do something about crime, Minister Young identified yesterday, he had the Chief of Defense Staff, he had a senior police officer. They were able to tell you, the national community, whether you are comforted or not, what they have been doing and what they are about to do. And I am in a position to tell you they are about to do. And they will continue, because they are the ones, law enforcement, who stand between you as law-abiding, decent people who go about your work and your life, and the criminals who have no regards for you and your rights, who will come to your home, who will rape your daughter, who will burn down your house. It is law enforcement that stands between you and them. Between we and them. But they need the resources. We give you the assurance we'll provide that to the extent that we could afford it. We've just ordered 2 hostile vessels to patrol these coasts again to replace the OPVs that they dismantled, called Lemons, took back the money and spent. And so it is. We give you the assurance we will continue to provide resources to the police and law enforcement. And we will continue to approach the Parliament, which is the only place at which it could be done, with measures to push back the criminals lawfully and constitutionally. We have been getting no support from them, and I became very irritable this morning when I saw, almost in boastful fashion, Suraj Ratan Rambachan telling you, the country, openly that they will not support it for whatever they think it is worth. I thank you very warmly, and I am very much open to your thoughts and or your questions.
Minister Hinds, can you appreciate that the citizenry is a little bit past watching the tit-for-tat between the government and the opposition? I think it gets a little bit heavy for citizens to see, you bring legislation, they oppose legislation, the legislation is passed or it isn't passed, or they argue it, the benefits, the downfalls, things like that, but these things are still happening to them.
That's a very useful thought, and yes, I can understand, but I hope that I would have communicated that the citizens too have a role to play, not just on election day, but throughout their lives, throughout our days, in between elections. You see, because if you would have voted for persons to act with decency and to act in the public interest, and they cannot, on the basis of your own logic, on the basis of your own intellect as a citizen, satisfy you that they are acting with decency and nobility and in your best interest, you have a duty, just like the banks did. The Bankers Association spoke very loudly during the FATCA debate and said if they did not support the legislation, it would do harm to the banking business and correspondent banking in Trinidad, and it would hurt every citizen. It is the duty of the citizen, therefore, to speak up and speak out. Take off your party hat, take off your party coat, and to speak up and out. And if they are not acting in your interest, the citizen must say so. And when the next election comes, don't come to tell the government about crime, crime, crime. Watch us on our record. See what we have done. See what we have attempted to do. And see who the obstruction is. And then vote them out. If we had 26 seats, we won't have this problem. That's why when we campaign next, I'll be asking for 27. It's one of the ways you get rid of the UNC and get rid of their unnecessary obstruction and problem. This is mad. This is illogical. This is criminal. In this crime season, when you're calling on us to do something, what do we do? I am not a police officer. Stuart Young is not a police officer or prison officer. We don't do nothing. We make policy from the cabinet. We provide financial resources. We go to the Parliament and we make law. That's what we do. Judge us on the basis of what our role and responsibility is. So to the citizens, in response to your question, you have a role to play. And when people who are lawyers sitting down in the Parliament wearing lawyer hat, senior counsel, and wearing parliamentary hat and telling you, I'm going to be going to court against it. And when they were in office and they used the offices they held in order to get access to information and then come back and beat Trinidad and Tobago on our tails with the same information. That happened. They passed the Children's Authority law. They proclaimed it. But they did not put the administrative pieces in place. They didn't put a children's facility under the law. And the same Ramlogan. And as they leave office, he go in the court and sue the state for not doing that which they did not do. Something is wrong about that. And when I sit down in the parliament and watch the member for Siparia, I am not watching a parliamentarian, you know. I'm watching a lawyer there of senior counsel, SC, MP. You may think a letter is missing. And telling me she's going to court and have done it.
Mr. Hinds, are you saying that the murders and the mayhem in the country will continue unless the U.S. supports these special majority legislation?
I have not said that. But I said to you, legislation is an important platform, an important piece, an important plank in the work that the government must do in order to deal with this situation. I have no doubts, notwithstanding all of the talk, at the end of the day, there are things to be done. We are trying, the Minister of National Security and the leadership of the police service, to motivate every single police officer. They should be highly motivated. They should be possessed of religious zeal like Jehovah's Witnesses, to go from door to door, criminal to criminal, taxi to taxi, and hunt down gun, hunt down criminal. That's the level of motivation they're supposed to be operating at in this crime season.
Do you think that Commissioner Griffith is trying?
Yes, I think so. And I know there are many police officers who give their best, but I also know as a fact, as a citizen of this country with access, as a former public servant, police officer, perhaps 40% of the police service, 40% of the teaching service, 40% of the nursing service, 40% of Trinidad and Tobago workforce really exert maximum. And I'm sure not all of you in the media work as hard as Anna Ramdas and Gail Alexander and Sean Douglas and Mr. Wason. Not everybody works as hard. So part of the problem we have in Trinidad and Tobago is that there's work to be done. And a lot of people not doing the work they're supposed to be done. That's a fact. So I never said, Madam Ramdas, that it's only legislation. Obviously not. But it's an important piece. And there's a blockage and a stoppage here. And I want the public to understand it. In other words, it is not to that extent, it is not all in our hands. Yes? Mr. Douglas?
I kind of had something, I wasn't sure what we were coming, what the topic would have been today, but I actually have made a list
So, well,
of
we will do that after we have exhausted the questions on the matter that I have raised. Have we exhausted those?
I just have one more question.
Yes, indeed.
Mr. Hinds, you said 6 of the 24 murders took place in Laventille over the past week.
6 that I recall. I mean, I'm sure they're happening all over the country, of course. But I know, as a matter of fact, they killed 3 guys, and that guy got killed. I mean, over the last few weeks, I'm sure we would have accounted. I've seen enough bloodshed.
How do you feel as MP that, the murders continue in Laventille and it continues to be a crime hotspot? People can drive there because they can get shot and killed. What's happening there? You're on the ground, so what's happening in Laventille that issue is not being...
As Minister Young painstakingly pointed out yesterday, a large part of this has to be the availability of firearms, the easy access to them by unthinking boys in some cases. Sometimes we see videos and we have reports that even school boys have access to guns. They find a lot of joy in being around or having guns. Not all of the people, the vast majority of people in my constituency, truthfully speaking, and put aside all politics, are ordinary, hard-working, decent people like you. Some of them have done better than you and I in academic terms, in entrepreneurial terms, in social terms, even as men and women of the cloth. Decent people. But of course, like everywhere else, there are a group of people who are bent on making crime and criminality their way of life. They don't intend to work. They get up when the day come, and not just in Laventille, all over Trinidad and Tobago, and I guess the world, and spend the whole day watching videos, smoking, drinking, liming, and 20 years later, when you are at the top of your field in journalism, the editor or the owner of the newspaper, and they compare themselves with you. They say, look, she have and I don't have, and they vex. And then they are very much encouraged by some of the movies that are available to them now. I watched a movie the other day. I was entrapped for 3 hours traveling between one state in the US to another one. I was entrapped because I don't normally have time to watch movies. But I was there on this bus and this movie was playing. And you know who the star was? The gun. From the time the movie started, it's only bang, bang, brrr, whole time and cuss word. The star was obscene language and gun. So when these children are watching that, that's what they know. And all of them have smartphones, which their smart parents buy expensive toys and give them, so they're seeing it all, along with a lot of other filth. So the children are becoming spoiled and corrupted. They get to fall in love with guns. They don't have respect for women. They don't have respect for children. They don't have respect for gray hair elders. They don't have respect for the church, the mosque, the mandir. And then it falls to law enforcement to pick it up. So law enforcement is doing it. But as I told Laventil last week, there's a role for all of you. Parents have a role. Teachers have a role. The pundit have a role. The imam, the pastor, the priest. Every adult in the community has a role. The media has a role. And the opposition has a role too. So I came here to you to point out today that notwithstanding their noble role under the law and the Constitution, they're not playing it, and they're telling us shamelessly in advance that this is what their position is, because they believe that they'll get some kind of gain out of the mayhem that they see in the society and point a finger at the government. How short-sighted, how stupid, how UNC.
Questions off the...
You are like Mr. Douglas. Have we exhausted all of the questions in relation to the matters I have raised? In which case I should entertain the lady first. Do you have any objections, Mr. Douglas, as a gentleman?
As a gentleman.
No. Thank you very much. How can I...
Just on two things. Mr. Devant Maraj is passing around a report that is allegedly about the Chief Justice and an opinion on the Chief Justice. It's by Queen's Counsel Howard Stevens. Can we confirm whether that document is real?
As for Devant Maraj, hearing his name is a little bit irksome and causes me to become irascible. Devant Maraj has taken upon himself to be a bit of a noise as a former minister of government. You might recall on one occasion, the PNM had a rally when we were in opposition. I think we were walking to Shagaramas, and we had thousands of people on the streets. And there were a group of people, some street dwellers, one of whom I know well from the Mova area. I saw him up to about 2 weeks ago. They came into the PNM rally with red jerseys, apparently PNM supporters, with racist placards, hostile commentary about Indians in this country. I spoke to one of those guys who told me that they were paid money by elements of the UNC to do that, to create angst and anger on the part of the UNC supporters and on the part of East Indians in this country against the PNM. We live that.
So is it that you believe the documents to be fake, or is it real?
The UNCs are fake. So I'm saying to you, they have demonstrated, and I have information, that it is not past these people to do things to create serious problems and discomfort in this society.
The second question I had for you was, it is now close to the end of July, and we haven't really heard much on, or an update on marijuana legislation coming to Parliament.
Yes, we did promise that we would consult with the national community. We have done that. We have drafted the regulations. We have drafted the measures that must be put to the Parliament for consideration for the matters we want to treat with. Those matters are now all ready for the consideration of the cabinet. But while we were in good spirits and in good intention, saying that we'll do so by the end of June, in the actual working of the thing, some of the areas became obviously a little more complicating than they might have easily appeared. That took us a little longer. Those issues are being resolved, but we want to not sacrifice accuracy for speed. So for those who are disappointed, we seek your leave for a few more days to get the thing right. The Parliament is now on vacation. We are in the process of finalizing this, but our promise will be kept. We are looking at decriminalizing certain amounts of the material, and of course, we are looking at the possibility of cleansing the records of those who would have been prosecuted in accordance with existing law. And of course, we are making arrangements to, like everywhere else, permit medical use and experimentation for medical purposes with the herb.
Well, I was looking at certain foreign issues that have a legal implication that you would know. Well, we're looking at the CCJ have made this court ruling on the Guyana impasse, and is this something that the government should be making a comment on, and in fact CARICOM, is it something that should be?
Well, for one thing, our position on Venezuela is our foreign. Our position on Venezuela highlighted our foreign affairs position generally. We do not get involved in the internal affairs of another state. If, as is happening in Guyana, the matter has gone to court, their highest court, the CCJ, and the court has pronounced, and we are seeing as citizens from across here, they are engaged in a process resolving their issues. We're quite happy with that. I don't know what the Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago or the Minister of Foreign Affairs might say to the matter, but for my own part as a Minister of the government, I'm just happy to see that the people of Guyana are apparently resolving their issue, and that's good enough for me. We have enough here to deal with, including this burgeoning crime problem, and we have spelled out for you how we are tackling that, and I raise for you today a problem in our genuine attempts to assist the people of Trinidad and Tobago in that regard, which is being stymied by an unthinking, narrow-minded parliamentary opposition.
The second issue was there are about 200 plus Venezuelan migrants who have a lawyer who issued a pre-action protocol. So we want to know if your ministry would have received it, and would you be consulting your...
At this point, I'm unable to say specifically whether the ministry received it, but of course the Attorney General will be, by virtue of that office under the State Liability Proceedings Act, be a party to it. I am not able to say personally whether it has actually been served, but even if it was, and perhaps even if it wasn't, we are always ready to respond to any legal challenges that might come.
The other little thing was the Point Fortin Highway Commission of Inquiry. Do we have like a date for when this would be expected to begin?
Well, the announcement was made that one will be staged, and arrangements are being made now. All of the physiological elements and administrative elements, and of course contracting the persons who would so serve and so on, and those matters are being handled. As soon as a date for its beginning is known, the public will be invited to, will be so advised. That Commission of Inquiry is critical, and again, it gave the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago an opportunity to see in the minds, the devious minds of the parliamentary opposition and the UNC, because no sooner was that announced, Immediately, Dr. Moonilal, Kamla Prasad Bissessa, they all jumped out. They know in advance it's going to be a waste of time. They know in advance how much it will cost. But you know, they don't pay any attention to the revelation of the truth. Because when we speak in the parliament, it's one thing, but when you have a commission of inquiry with evidence being taken, as happened with Clico, as happened with the airport, it's a record, like a court of record. It is recorded like Hansard does, notes are taken, sworn statements are given, and evidence is, well, yeah, information is built up, which ultimately goes to the DPP, and if he sees elements of criminality, he, like in the case of the airport, and he, like in the case of Clico, will decide what he, the DPP, would do. But it is a most useful exercise. But immediately, the UNC jumped up, it's going to cost so much, it's a waste of time. They don't want you to know the truth. And worse than that, Madam Kamla Prasad Bissessa jumps from that inquiry and begins to talk about other matters that have nothing to do with it, where some of her cohorts would have found themselves before the court, and using the Commission of Inquiry and knowing in advance it will be a waste of time, telling us that the PNM is persecuting other people. They're just one band of friends. I wish I could have used other language. They are just one band of friends, all with the same mind. And as a student of criminology, I can find other descriptors, but for the time being, I'll content myself with that. Yes, well, yes, that's all right. Every question is a valid one. And I might just find you a teeny-weeny answer. Yes.
There was a refugee child whose parents have registered under the UNHCR, so not a Venezuelan kid, but actually from Syria, a Syrian kid. And he's apparently been debarred from entering even private schools. Apparently there's some law that says that the Ministry of National Security has to give the nod, but at the moment there seems to be a ban. I don't know if I'm going to get the impression it could be a blanket ban on refugee kids getting into school. So I don't know if there's any, and nobody seems to know anything about it, because I'm seeing that there aren't proper regulations for these refugees and asylum seekers, apart from the migrant thing is a different Venezuela. But I don't know if that resonates, if there's anything that you know.
You see, you're going to get a teeny answer, neither do I.
Okay. Okay.
I know nothing of it.
Okay.
It appears as though we have exhausted all of the matters that we had planned to raise, and I would like to sincerely thank you, members of the media, for your attendance, and I look forward to being in your very distinguished company as appropriate in the future. May I thank you.